Recording.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Destreza lecture series. My name is Puck Curtis, and I'm here with Eric Myers, who's my co-host. And tonight, I want to introduce you to Kate Hickey, who will be our speaker tonight. Did I say your name right?
You did.
Perfect. All right, so Kate has studied HEMA since 2007, and she was a co-founder of the Brisbane School of Iberian Swordsmanship in late 2015. She's been a co-lead instructor at the school since then. And she's the author of BSIS's sort of delightfully irreverent study guide, which is filled with cartoons and like plain English explanations and examples of how to do different Destreza techniques. She created that to accompany the school's lessons and then later released them into the international HEMA community where they've been really well received. HEMA was her first sport, which places her in a really good position to speak of those on behalf of people who are learning movement skills for the first time. There's a lot of things that we might take for granted, and so coming in with a perspective that helps somebody who doesn't have those skills and knowing where you can go wrong, that's a really useful perspective. Within her school, she's described as a powerful leader who does a lot of the organizational heavy lifting. She's going to be talking tonight about how the school has incorporated modern teaching theory into its syllabus. And part of the reason why I was particularly interested in having her visit us tonight, we had Sean and Lois both come and speak, and her name kept coming up in ways that I thought were really critical to the way that their school functions, both as a leader and an organizer. And I really love her perspective on taking a topic, a really technical topic like Destreza theory, which can be really intimidating and really weighty and sort of oppressive. People wrote satires about how heavy and weighty the technical theory was for this tradition. And she's really sort of pushed a pin in that and made it lighthearted, approachable, and fun. So I'm really interested in what she has to say about that. And I think we could all benefit. So I'm going to stop singing your praises, but I'm so glad that you came to talk to us about that, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Galanguru Withuru, which is Turrbal for hello. The Turrbal people are the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on today and the land that our school trains on, and they have a continuing history of preserving the history of the area, and I think that's something that's close to all of our hearts. A continuing history of teaching and learning. I want to say thank you to Puck and to Eric and to the Sacramento Field School for having me along today and giving me the chance to talk about something that I'm really quite passionate about, giving the best possible experience to people that come to us to learn Destreza and helping ourselves to learn as well. And certainly any of us who are teaching Destreza, I am sure will say we are all still learning. Yeah? Teaching and learning, they're two sides of the same coin. So I'm hoping that people will, whether they're teachers or learners of Destreza, will all come away with something today that's useful, with a bit of perhaps an understanding of how BSIS approaches our pedagogy, which is a fancy word for how we teach. And there are a few main points that I really hope will stick with you. So first of all, if you're learning Destreza, I really think it's very helpful to, excuse my handwriting, to identify the methods that help you to learn. And secondly, very importantly, to understand that you have the right to ask to be taught in a way that you can understand. Okay? What you do with that right's a separate thing, but you certainly have the right to ask to be taught in a way you can understand. If you're teaching, the most important one that I've come across that comes up time and time again is if you have a learning problem, if a student is not grasping what you're trying to teach them, if you have a learning problem, this is a teaching challenge. Okay, a learning problem is a teaching challenge. It's you need to write out your first response that you may have. The student is being difficult, they're not paying attention, they're stupid, they just shouldn't be there. Write that out if that is your first response, and think about what you can do to help them to learn, okay? And secondly, if you have trouble trying to solve your learning problem, one of the best solutions I've ever come across is to ask the student. Okay? Student has a unique insight into how they learn. So if you have come across somebody that you've never taught short people before, you can talk to them, or somebody who's excessively tall. If you've got somebody whose boobs get in the way of the situation, what you're trying to teach them to do, and you've never taught anybody with that problem before, you can ask them to help you and ask them what they need. Okay, so how do these things fit in with the BSIS pedagogy? Our pedagogy document's about 6 pages long. The link to it might magically appear in the chat if somebody from BSIS would like to add it. And I'm just going to go through it step by step. Look at, first of all, we start with our key values. So our key values are integrity, democracy, respect, humility. Nearly got them. All right, respect, humility, enjoyment, and responsibility. So they're nice words, the kind of thing that would say, well, we all do that, surely. So it's when you come down to the individual circumstances that you really want to think about, am I acting with integrity? Is what I'm doing consistent with my key values? So for example, with integrity, suppose a student comes, interrupts you in class and tells you you've got something wrong, and they do it quite rudely. It is important to act with integrity and say, yes, I am wrong. You can deal with the rudeness separately, okay? And sometimes you'll find that people who are expecting to be disregarded might approach quite rudely because they're expecting a bad response. And the more you show your students that you're prepared to accept that you're not the God of fencing and that you can make a mistake, or that you're prepared to discuss things, the more I find the atmosphere becomes very friendly. Okay. Humility. I love this one. I love this one. Where's Carranza? Here he is over here. I use the image of Carranza and who he teaches when I'm thinking about my relationship with any student that I might have a bit of, that might be a bit fraught, which doesn't happen very often at all. But anyway, Carranza was teaching the kings of Spain. Here we go, kings of Spain, all right? The grandees of Spain, incredibly wealthy, incredibly powerful people. So when you talk to a student and you have a difference of opinion, remember that you, or hold in mind that maybe you should be talking to somebody as if they were somebody who could complain about you and you might disappear the next day. All right. What I mean is, you are not a more important person than your student. Okay? Another one I would like to talk about is responsibility, because that's this one here. Your learning problem is a teaching challenge. Okay, so you are responsible for the learning of your students. They are adults. They come to us to learn, and they are quite frequently, mostly paying to learn. We're not poor school teachers sitting with a class full of pupils who want to be anywhere else but there. We have people who want to learn. So if they're failing to learn, you need to take responsibility for that and think about how you might change the way that you're teaching. So that's a little bit about the BSIS key policies or key values.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So it looks like that you have put a lot of thought into this, specifically regarding teaching theory. So do you have a background that gives you this insight, or is this something that you studied?
Let me acknowledge my sources. I have drawn on quite a few people and sources to come up with the information that I've got. One of the biggest influences for me was our pedagogy coach. So we started right at the beginning with a pedagogy coach who was Hannah, first year a high school teacher, university medalist. So she knew the latest and in-depth how we should be approaching teaching. So that was extremely helpful. Sean was also very widely read in the area. So he would say something and Hannah would put it into the technical jargon. We have people like Sharon and Lois who are university lecturers and university tutors. Ron, who has run a martial arts school. So, and this is a great thing, like draw on all the people around you. You don't have to run a school on your own. So those were my sources. And when we first began to teach, or when we put this document together, we all sat down and sort of brainstormed it, and then Hannah put it into the formal language that it's in now. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
I really like, Kate, I really like the things that you have in it as the pedagogy key values, right? I mean, we spend so much time, in other areas teaching teachers how to behave, right? It's not just what they know. It's not just the skill of teaching, but it's how to, teach in a humane and effective way however it helps the student to learn.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because if you start with those values, a lot of decisions just flow from them, I find. Yeah. Okay. So that is the start of our document. And then that brings us to the how. How do we actually implement these things? Okay. I'm going to skip forward through the document to the section on learning styles, because this is probably the area where I have come to be known by Puck, and it's about teaching people in a way that they can understand. So at BSIS, we want our instructors to teach in a method that covers visual, audio, reading, writing, and kinesthetic, which is movement. These come from something called Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. And that is, the science behind that is quite dodgy, okay? It's some of the references are circular. It has these distinct boxes that are not necessarily have any reason for being distinct. So we want to use it sort of more like guidelines, really. Okay, in the manner of the Pirates of the Caribbean, more like guidelines. Okay, but they do give, it still gives us a lot of useful techniques. So let's look at them individually. Visual, the first one is, a lot of HEMA teaching has traditionally been, or sports teaching traditionally has been very visual. I show you, you copy me, okay? If that is all you teach, and that's the only way that you teach, you may often find that that's the only kind of student that you have, which reinforces the feeling that that's the only way I need to teach. But maybe you are losing all those students who need something else. For example, I don't learn very well visually at all. When somebody shows me a technique, I see a Picasso. I'm so pleased by this because Picasso is Spanish, and I got one with a sword. So I'm quite delighted by that one. Okay, so somebody shows me a technique, and I go, this is what I see. You are not helping. And then they show it to me again, and I'm like, still a Picasso. All right. So, but some people do learn very well like that. They watch combat across the room, and suddenly a technique that they've seen is appearing in their combat. So you definitely need to teach visually. Some people need very small visual chunks. We're so used to doing things to Destreza by the time we start teaching that sometimes we forget how much we needed to learn right at the beginning. And a Tahoe seems so basic and simple, but there is so much involved with where your hand is, where your wrist is, what your shoulder's doing, that somebody who's not good at learning visually may need you to break that down into very small chunks. And a student who wants, who can tell you that they need very small chunks should be made to feel like they are as important a part of the class as somebody that can get it straight away. Every student should be equal. So if somebody says to you, I need very small chunks and I need perhaps to practice those things over and over again before I move on to this next chunk, that's an ideal student. That's somebody who can tell you what they need, who understands what they need. They can articulate what they need. They've done half the work for you in trying to figure out how to solve their problem. All you've got to do then is figure out, well, how do I give them what they need? And if you're teaching a technique, you should be able to break it into various levels. So you don't necessarily want to say, do it this way, because you are not, you're not up to this. So don't create levels. So you can say, well, here's an exercise. You can choose whether you want to do this one as it's described. Suppose we're teaching general, and say, okay, this is how you will do a line and a cross. For these students who've done it several times before, or for somebody that wants a bit of extension work, perhaps you could experiment on what happens if you change some of the parameters and you do something in the manner of a line and a cross, you attack to a different side. And some students may wish to concentrate purely on the spiral in this lesson. Don't do any footwork, don't do anything, don't do an attack, just concentrate on the spiral. So you can still teach visually and yet break it down to somebody who's not terribly good at catching a visual. So now I'm just showing you a spiral.
Okay, we have a question. Is there some lessons that you've learned about how to teach a group where you can do something, or your presentation initially is such that it covers a fairly broad base for people with many different preferences and how they need or how they learn or what they need to learn?
I am always learning. And certainly when I walk into a class and I know there's a huge disparity on the amount of detail some people will need, it is very challenging. And it's also very exciting when you walk out and you think you've actually achieved that. How to do it? There's so many variables. Really, I think you need to be a bit prepared. Usually you'll know who's in your class before you go into it, roughly, and I have an idea of who's in the class, and maybe run through what techniques you're trying to teach and how you might give extension. Extension work, I find, tends to be easier because people naturally are ready to move on and they might almost create their own exercises. So that's more a matter of giving them the okay to go ahead and experiment a little. With people who need some more specific assistance, I often I'll come around during the class and assist. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that is like. Do you tend to have a single instructor for a class at BSIS, or do you have assistants, or do you make use of senior students to help out also? How do you run that? I mean, we're a different case, right, at Sacramento, because we have more than one teacher.
Yeah, we have usually one instructor, and we have four classes running at a time, at the same time. So there's 4 instructors on the floor. With each class, if we know a class is particularly large, then we might assign a second instructor, or if we're training an instructor, we might assign a second instructor. We are very top-heavy as a school with administration and instruction, but I really like the way that works. We try to have a different, so for example, in the apprentice group, we will try to have a different instructor for the apprentice group each week, so that they can learn from different types of people, because people just click, I think, sometimes with different instructors. Yeah. And it's dreadful to be stuck with somebody you don't click with lesson after lesson.
Yeah.
We have another question from the chat. So do you have an approach for teaching people with sensory motor integration challenges?
Okay. Yes, and that is usually to give more detail and require and more steps. So I also I feel that I probably fit on the autism spectrum, and I did approach a student with just that and said, look, I think I sit on the autism spectrum. I feel that some of your problems are very similar to some of my problems, and they just opened up, and we had a very frank discussion about how I could help. So again, that came back to asking the student, talking to the student about how I could help. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. Thank you.
Okay.
The person who asked the question was pleased that.
Okay. So it can be helpful to send an instructor or somebody who you think will have a good relationship with the student to ask the question, if that helps too. Okay. Also on the topic of visual, there's a lot going on with the human body when you display a technique. There's an awful lot happening. There's so many parts of the body moving. There are ways to give visual information that are not simply demonstration. For example, if you want to show the line that a rapier goes through when it's making a cut or a reverse, or how you drop your tip and to do a half cut, you can use, that's a cut up milk bottle. So you can use that kind of thing to assist with training. You can use.
Sorry, I have a question about that. Sorry, you had those up real quick and then dropped them. I'd love you to walk us through those.
Okay, I haven't used one of these for a while. So right-handed reverse. So if your student is standing in the center of that, and we're going to do a where are we? That'll be a cut. Your tip will come. I usually would have them stand beside me. Here we go. Your tip will come around here in this style. So what I'm giving them is a very simple visual of just what their tip has to do. And sometimes they can then fold their body into what needs to happen to just get the tip to do that. Yeah. Yes?
That makes sense. I wanted to see the other one as well.
Oh, the other one. Oh my God. Okay. That's that we put up against a dark background. So when we do in our earlier, we separate our half cuts into an apprentice and a novice half cut to keep the novices doing a far slower technique. They drop their tip as opposed to just taking a tahoe and cutting. We drop our tip, bring the weapon round behind us, come back in on the same side of the line. So that's half cut and half reverse, or depending on whether you're left or right-handed.
I've just never seen anything like that. It's really creative. I really like it.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's lots of other ways of doing visual. You can speak visually as well. Like you can say like a butterfly wing, like an infinity symbol. Maybe that's auditory. Maybe that's visual. It doesn't matter. The boxes aren't important. Don't put your students in little boxes and go, ha, you're an auditory learner. That's all you get. No, don't do that. So, all right. Auditory learners.
I know you can't hear it, but you are getting laughs in the chat.
Yay. All right. That was the whole point. Laughter is helpful. People remember jokes. Okay. So we're talking about auditory then. This is people who learn by hearing you talk. It's also people who learn by talking. And I know a couple of very intelligent people who learn best if they can say to somebody, just have anybody listen to them while they talk through a technique. So if you as a student need to do that, then don't think that that's wrong. That's quite reasonable. And if you find a student wants to say back to you what you've just said to them, that it can be a learning thing. They are trying to learn and they need to hear it out loud. Okay. For people who are auditory learners, it is really quite important to get the words right. Those of us who are very visual sometimes don't feel that the words are terribly important and might use the word reverse when we mean a cut or something like that. But for those people who are auditory learners, the words are very important. That's what they're hanging on to while they're trying to do something. So you do need to be quite specific and use the correct words. I think if you think of it like when we read a primary source, the pictures are helpful. The words are what we need, okay? So for an auditory learners, the pictures, the visual that you're showing them is helpful, but the words are what they're really paying attention to. Okay. Written, reading, writing. Okay. So people cannot read and listen at the same time. So I think a whiteboard is a wonderful thing, but don't put too much on it, okay? It's great to put your main points on, and it actually helps reinforce your main points as well. I'm very lucky to have this enormous whiteboard, but for a long time I was working with a little $2 whiteboard from a junk shop. You don't need anything fancy. You can hold up notes in class, which will help your reading and writing learners. Actually, this one is probably not reading, but we're not worrying about boxes. So this is a diagram straight out of text, which I use when I'm helping to explain why right angle is a good thing. I find that this one gets a lot more attention. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, okay. That gets a lot of talk going in the class, because what we have, if you couldn't see, that's a cat with a much larger reach than a second cat, just doing the big brother thing where they put their hand on their forehead, says, can't reach me. So it gets all sorts of discussion about defensive distance, the advantage of the right angle, very useful thing. So you can use lots of bits and pieces. Okay. Oh, and people who read written stuff might like something like my class notes. So they want to go away and they want to read about what they did in class. And the class notes also have references through to what Puck's written, so that people who really want to read about a technique instead of just a quick picture can go through to Puck's stuff and read in much greater detail about what's going on, as well as web links to the blog as well. Thank you, Puck, for all of that you've made available to people.
You are so welcome. I have to ask, is that shirt, are those some of your cartoons?
Yes. Yes, they are. Okay. Where are we? Kinesthetic. I find this one really interesting because it's not one that growing up I have really understood. So it's one I've had to learn about coming into fencing. Kinesthetic is learning through feeling or through doing. So a student who needs a lot of kinesthetic help, it might be good to wander over while you're talking about a technique and just quietly adjust their blade. Don't bring attention to them, but just quietly move them into the position. If you're going to touch their body, you need permission first, but that can help. But also, it can be really helpful to speak kinesthetically, which was something I didn't realize that we can actually do. But once you start looking for examples, they're everywhere. It's like doing expulsion, like casting a fishing line, doing a cut as if you were doing a tennis forehand and a reverse like a backhand. This is no help to me because I've never played tennis. So that was just a visual cue rather than a kinesthetic one. But for somebody who's actually done that before, they know what that feels like in their muscles. One I particularly like, which I think came from Lois, was talking about following the thrust through, teaching a student how to keep their point on line. If you follow that thrust through as if it's the pull string on a pull string doll, like our Woody doll from Toy Story, okay? There's a rapier in my chest, okay? So I find that one makes it very clear what you want that weapon to do as it's approaching. Oh, pucks, check time, and what do we check your nightclub stamp, or check the time before you do a cut. That's a very kinesthetic way of explaining it. It's bringing up the muscle, what you do with your muscles to do that movement. So, yeah, okay. What else have we got? Oh, I did like Puck's exercise where he's teaching about how reducing the number of options will increase the speed that you can work at. You drop a glove for the student to catch and explain that. That's a very kinesthetic, a hands-on way of learning. But there's lots of examples out there that you can throw into your class. Okay. Yep. But don't be constrained by these boxes. Don't jam your students into the boxes or think that you can only teach in these ways. I'd be really curious to know if people think they learn in different ways from these four. I think I learn very geometrically. If you tell me to turn my hand to 45 degrees or step on a diagonal line, I'm absolutely fine with that. I completely understand it. I feel a bit of a kinship. I wonder if maybe Carranza felt the same way, that he was absolutely seeing the circle as he was teaching and learning Destreza. Whereas some people I know simply cannot imagine where a diagonal line will take them. And for them, I might, well, we're doing footwork, put your rapier down on the floor at a 45-degree angle to show you where that line is and step on the rapier. So if you're a teacher and you're setting up, you're deciding you're going to teach a particular technique, I would ask myself, how can I display it? How can I break down that display into chunks that suit the audience that I'm teaching to? Trying to remember very hard that at one point in time, you did not know this technique and it's made up of quite a lot of parts. How do I verbally explain it using the precise language? How can I give my students something to read about this, and what kind of words, or how can I explain what it feels like to do the motion? And I think if you can do that, that can be very helpful. But teaching is big and teaching is hard. And if you are a student of Destreza, then help us out and just say, can you just explain in words what you just did? Or can you explain how that feels? Just ask, because we can't get it right all of the time, and we should be answering those questions when they come up. Yeah.
But there's a phrase that I've used for teaching a lot of teachers, and it's like, you have to be free to experiment, right? I mean, you have to learn all the things, right? I tell them they need to be comfortable doing experimentation on human subjects. That's the only way you're going to get better, right? Is are you successful or not? and the measure of success is the student. So students, I feel, should always feel comfortable asking a teacher for something else, or to do something a little bit differently, or to give them extra attention.
Yes, yes. I've had students ask questions and then keep apologizing for interrupting the class. I'm like, what do you think this class is here for? It's like, not for me to stand and orate, it's for us to all learn together. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Yeah, you definitely want to create an atmosphere where a student believes that that them asking a question to clarify what they want or to experiment is really, really valuable and important, and the basic principles behind the class. Okay. Do we have something? Yes. So, an example of how we might teach something in multiple ways. We expect our students to know all of the 14 actions of Destreza. You don't need to read this, but trust me, these are all the 14 actions of Destreza. Okay. So what I like to do is with each class, then I'm going to teach a particular technique. I was like, okay, this is the 14 actions of Destreza. This is where this technique sits overall. So there is reading, there's a visual, I don't know, we don't need to worry about what boxes it's in, but so we do that. And then I go, well, okay, that's a very long list of things. So we help out with a kinesthetic way of learning it as well. So we have the 2 changes of strength. We have the 3 defenses, we have the 4 generals, and the 5 attacks. Okay, and I can remember them because they are hand signals. Yes, yes. So there's the increase and decrease of strength, the 2 changes of strength. There's the 3 defenses, which are the atajo, the defense of the right angle, and the conclusion. There are the 4 generals, which we could go through, and there's the 5 attacks. So yes, those are the hand signals that I use.
Is that a mnemonic that is available as a way of memorizing?
That is, I tend to use it so that students can see it and they can take it up if they want to. I have had a student, I introduced it for one student that was having trouble covering it all, and I felt they were a very kinesthetic learner, and another student actually came up to me afterwards and said, that was so helpful. So you never know who you're going to help when you use that kind of stuff.
That's just fascinating. I love the different creative ways that you guys are putting this together.
Okay. 14 actions. One of the things I wanted to talk about, so if you're trying to teach something quite large, you need to break it down into smaller chunks. And that's a whole separate area. And there is a very good video by Keith Farrell that covers chunking and the research behind it and the amount of chunks the human brain can handle. So I hopefully that will get popped into the links as well. All right. So just remember, yes, that you have the right to ask. We have talked about that. Oh my goodness, I have just talked about one in-lesson behavior, which is making sure that we cater for a variety of learning styles. So let's talk about some of the other in-lesson behaviors. Constructivist student-centered learning. That means that a student that constructs, who learns a technique by working on it themselves, learns far better than one who is simply shown what to do. So if you can work it out a bit, if you're given the basics and you can work it out, then you learn far better. As a teacher, you are not the fountain of all knowledge pouring into an empty vessel. Often our students have a lot of experience in other areas that they can bring into learning Destreza. So it's important to, in BSIS, we find, and it's current teaching theory, that is the best way to teach. Okay, so let's look at another one. Collaborative and cooperative training. Try to create an atmosphere where everybody feels safe and comfortable, because learning needs to be a little bit unsafe. You have to be able to make mistakes. You don't learn without making mistakes. So you need to feel safe to embark on that. And Kaya Sadowski has written an excellent book about how to create a safe learning environment. So feel free to go and read that one. That's really good. Okay, inclusivity of all students. Yes, no? Sorry, inclusivity of all students. Is it? I'm being distracted by a video, so it's okay. That's not just the kind of people that come to mind immediately. The major brackets are like in Australia are protected categories such as race and gender and I can't remember. Anyway, but also anybody that is different or minority in any way. So left-handers, try to create a situation where everybody feels that they are equal. So we've tried very hard to present all of our techniques as inside or outside line rather than left and right, which is the way that they are written originally, so that a left-hander can follow those instructions and be not be given, this is how you do it, step to the right, left-handers just reverse everything, please. So we like to create a situation where nobody is othered, nobody is made to feel that they are the exception. Safety, I think we already talked about. Catering for variety of learning styles, we already talked about. Use and acknowledgement of historical sources is vital. We are HEMA. So if you're teaching something, then you should be explaining where you got it from. And if you're changing anything slightly, then, or filling in a hole, you should explain that you're filling in a hole. And as a student, you have the right to ask where things are coming from and to understand where that information is coming from. Feedback is love. Yeah, this is important. Feedback is an expression from somebody who is interested in staying with you. If they don't like where they are, they just leave, yeah? So anybody who's giving you feedback, no matter how it might be phrased, is in a way saying, I like being here. I just need something changed. And sometimes this can be phrased quite difficultly because people get passionate and they get upset and they want something changed, and they often will leave it to the last minute. And so what I want to say is, if you get feedback and your instinctive response is to go, oh, well, no, I'm right because, and you're wrong, and also you're shouting at me, and or you phrase that slightly rudely, try to ride that out, come back to that later, and listen to what they're saying. Even if their actual points of fact are wrong, it's usually there's something underlying it. So feedback is really crucial. The more you can get feedback from your students, the more frequently you can get it, the more you can nip a problem in the bud too. If people feel that they can come and talk to you, they won't wait till the last moment to explode. We have had a lot of feedback, and almost there's been no real problems with tone, you know, because people know they can approach us at any time. If you do have somebody who's very upset, just remember you can deal with behaviour separately. Behaviour is a separate issue. Feedback is important, and often if you deal with the feedback, behaviour is much simpler to deal with afterwards. So I have a questionnaire that the link will come up for at some point for feedback for this particular presentation. So please give me some love. It's only got 4 questions. Let me know how I did, and I would really appreciate that. Thank you. Also on the topic of feedback, one of the things that Hannah taught me early on was she was sitting in our lessons in the beginning and giving us some help afterwards. And rather than coming up to me and saying, this is what you need to work on, she simply said, tell me 3 things that you did well and 3 things that you need to work on. And I think as an instructor, that is a really helpful tool to come away from a class and go, okay, 3 things I did well, because sometimes some of us are very good at picking ourselves apart. So at least remember that you did something well. And now 3 things that I need to work on. And that can be very helpful. Language is also really, really important. You notice there's 3 things I need to work on rather than 3 things that I did wrong. And if you use that kind of language with students, it can be very helpful so that you're not automatically setting up defenses. So not, oh, you're doing, wait, no, that's wrong, let's fix it. Rather, yes, that's good, we're going to tweak it a little. Okay? Where are we now?
We often pick something kind of like that during class also, right? Like, instead of trying to fix everything, like build on certain successes and focus on just a couple problems.
That is very, yes, very true. Focusing on what they're doing well as what they need to work on. And yes, not snowing them with 1,000 different things to.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this also comes into we are not the font of all knowledge, pouring information into an empty vessel. This is about letting them explore and create an understanding on their own neural pathways, reinforcing stuff that they already have. I can't even remember the beginning of that sentence. Never mind. Okay.
I think it's really critical, though. I mean, just to build on that a little bit. When we're training instructors, the first thing they want to do, they want to run down a list, right? And sometimes that's the right answer. Like if you're doing an exam where you're learning to teach, so that we know that you've seen everything. But oftentimes it's not the right answer to present somebody with a list of things to fix. Pick what you want to fix today, and concentrate on that.
So much so, yes.
There have been a number of times where we've just totally changed the direction of a class is going because something that we had been planning on working on wasn't working for anyone. And instead of harping on it, we've picked something else that was generally going well, then we could build on success from there.
Yes.
But there was another interesting thing that I just remembered that I heard recently listening to someone talk about teaching language. And apparently one of the really key learnings for teaching language is don't give correction. Because no one takes it and fixes it on the spot. It just frustrates them, right? So what you want to do is give them repetition of success, repetition of things to, even if it's not perfectly correct, at least it's giving them practice. And then once they're comfortable with it, then they will pick up on whatever is the next step, whether it's the next word or the next conjugation or whatever it is. Yeah, no correction by teaching.
Wow.
Yeah.
I quite like that. That sounds really good, actually. It sounds like that would work for me, certainly. Okay. Since we're talking about words, one of the things we do with our instructors is go through with them how perhaps they might phrase things. So we actually give them a list of things. I might run through it. So the first thing, no, this is not it. Where's my piece of paper? Here it is. Okay. So for example, if you wanted to say your wrist is turning the wrong way, and then we ask our instructors, how can you say that in a positive fashion? I would reiterate what they're trying to achieve with the particular drill. So if the wrist is turning incorrectly when they're trying to do a spiral for a general, perhaps you would say, okay, so what are the rules of the general that we're trying to do, rather than, and get them to go, oh, I should be doing, oh, wait, that's not right. So that would be my answer there, to go back a step to reiterate what they're actually trying to achieve. What do you do when a student says an answer that was correct but not what you wanted? Well, you don't say no because they're correct. Yeah, so you say, yeah, that's true. And then you refine your question so that you might get towards the answer that you're after. Don't fiddle about while I show you this. Okay, so some people need to move, and some people, to understand what you are saying, need to actually, you'll see them slightly do the drill in order to retain it for long enough to actually do it after you've explained it. So some people really do need to move, and then you have your ADD students who actually simply need to move because they cannot listen without having their body move as well. That's not something that we want our instructors to use. Could the left-handers please partner each other? Like, how can you say that without making the left-handers feel left out? You don't need to. What we usually say is we want the drill partner to match the hand of the diestro. and that solves it for everybody. The drill partner match the hand of the Destro, and we want them to get to the point where they will do that automatically when they are partnered against a Destro. They'll look to see what hand they're using and match that. And then later, I mean, you can try against mixed hands. Okay. You're not the instructor in this class, but you are the student for a change. So you're an instructor, but you're in somebody else's class. Your drill partner has comments that they're doing something badly. You believe this is so, and you have ideas on how it could be fixed. What do you say? Very good. Nothing. Well, what you can say, because we don't want people not to have access to information when information is there. You can say, would you like any assistance? And listen to their answer. But certainly you don't start instructing somebody who is in the process of learning themselves. They may say out loud that they don't know how to do something. The next step might be them figuring out how to do it. So always ask, if you are not the instructor, always ask if they need assistance. Okay. Could we please have the juniors at the front of the hall and the seniors near the stage? We are a very non-hierarchical school. We do not have juniors and seniors. We do not have people who are better than others. We do not have people who can give orders to other grades. So we just use the names of the grades. Can we have the scholars up by the stage and the novices down the bottom, down here? I'd like to speak about more experienced and less experienced rather than junior and senior. Okay. If you're not sure how to help a student, who is the best person to ask? Clue. Ask the student. So that is that. Okay, I've talked very quickly, so I have a case study here if we would like to go into it, or do you want me to wrap up, Puck? Where do you want?
No, we still have 30 to 40 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So we block out an hour and a half, so I would love to hear the case study.
Okay.
I've got a question first before you go into that,
yeah.
Kate. So I like that you've talked about like your teaching, your instructor teaching program, right, where you're working with that. But when you showed us your other visual aids and stuff that you used before, like your laminated slides and stuff, are those things that you share with the whole instructor crew, or does everyone kind of bring their own way of doing it or their own materials? How does that work? Do you have like, here's your package of examples to start with?
I am probably the most enthusiastic props person amongst the instructors. I always show them what I've come up with, and they're always welcome to borrow them. Yeah, I like the idea of other instructors having their own, so that as lessons cycle round, people get taught in different ways. So yes, I think that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay. A case study here is one question that often comes up in how do I teach questions. What do I do with a student who tries to win the drill? You want them to do a particular thing. You want them to get hit by the Destro, but the training partner insists on not letting that happen. Okay, so here is a couple of standard responses, or several standard responses that I frequently see to that question. And there's enough of us. We could probably, in the chat, put a number 1 to 5 of whether you think it's in line with BSIS pedagogy. So if this answer sounds like a thing BSIS would do, that's a 1. We like that one. Through to a 5. Can you see this? I don't know if you can see it. Should have done it larger. Never mind.
Can see it.
There we go. Through to a 5, where it's not close to the BSIS pedagogy. All right, number 1. And then perhaps Puck or Eric could give me a general feel for how people are responding. Be clear that they are doing a bad thing.
All right, this is your time, people, to type in it.
Yep, a 1 to a 5.
A lot of high scores here.
A lot of high scores.
Oh, Tim Rivera said that this is a 1. No, I'm just
Okay.
messing with Tim.
Okay, thank you. I'm pleased to hear that people have been listening. Yes, we don't use that kind of negative language. We definitely do not make that negative language. So it's not helpful either. It's not giving them any direction on what they should be doing instead. Number 2, compliment loudly the drill partners who are doing it correctly.
I'm seeing 3s to 4s.
3s and 4s.
Sorry, so a bit of an average. It's a good start. It's certainly a helpful thing to do. I don't think it solves the problem entirely, but it's treating people well. It's hoping that somebody will educate themselves by listening to this. I think it's a great start. Oh, let's try the next one. Hit them hard. I do see this come up. It's disengage, teach them a lesson. Maybe sometimes it doesn't come up as actually hit them hard, but certainly it's offered as a solution frequently.
Nobody
universal
sets anything but a 5.
Okay, yes. I also think this is actually quite dangerous. If you've got a person who really needs to win and you are setting up in a situation where they are going to lose and there's pain involved, you can have this increasing loop of excessive force. So I think that one is actually quite dangerous. You may get away with it if you are an instructor and you have a power structure that they don't dare to respond in kind, but all that teaches is that the person who is the most powerful is allowed to hit hard. So that's not a good thing to be teaching. Okay. They don't want to learn, don't bother to teach them. Oh dear.
Yeah, universally 5s on this one as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is correct. They clearly want to learn. They've come to your class. They have paid money to be there. They want to learn. That is not what the problem is. So you have a teaching problem. You have a teaching challenge. You do not have a learning problem. Definitely, that is not the answer that you're looking for. All right. 6, correct or praise both the Destreza and the training partner.
We have almost all 1s and 1 3.
Okay, yeah, good. I quite like this. Yeah, it shows that what you're trying to achieve in the drill, both people are trying to achieve something. It is not just the Destreza who is trying to get something right. So yes, that is a good approach. The next one, they don't understand what you want from them.
Threes, 4s, and 5s.
Yeah, it's kind of a good start. It's like, okay, you've identified the problem. You've actually identified what the learning problem is that they don't understand. So then we need to move on to how do we actually solve the learning problem. It's like, okay, well, it's good. Perhaps they do not understand. It's not always actually what the problem is, but sometimes it is. Sometimes you do need to start again and explain what the purpose of a training partner is. The purpose of a training partner is to give the feedback that the Destreza needs to make their technique successful. And you succeed when they succeed. So you're changing the win conditions. You're no longer winning by landing a hit. You are winning by allowing your partner to learn. Okay. Punish the behavior with push-up. seen a few smiles.
We've got everything from 2. One person put in a 58.
Thank you. I don't think that this fits with BSIS's core values of respect or humility. I personally would not like to ask the King of Spain to do push-ups when he's not doing what I ask of him. So that's not something I would recommend. I would want our instructors doing. I find it quite counterproductive. If they're doing push-ups, they're using their muscles for something. They're wearing themselves out. It seems like, yeah, it's not for BSIS. Okay. Okay, another answer. You need to find out the cause. Is it competitiveness? Is it fear of injury?
A lot of ones.
Yeah. Yes, I like it. Yes. Ask the student. Find out the cause. Because actually fear of injury was one that would not have occurred to me. So if we're busy thinking, oh, well, it's because they desperately need to win, and you don't ask the student, then you're going to be given all the wrong solutions. So I think that's very, very valid. Okay. Next one, use language carefully. Don't have winners and losers.
Mostly ones on that.
Yep, I agree. Yes, if somebody is winning the drill because they desperately need to win, because that's very important to them, then you saying that they are the loser, using that kind of language just reinforces their need to win the drill. So if you can avoid that, that can be very helpful. All right. Let the person who needs to win go first as Diestro. When we're switching partners, let them go first as Diestro to give them the chance to win first and get them to work that out.
Ones, twos, and threes.
Yep. This is actually, I've seen this in action and it does work. It does work, gives that person a bit of a chance to know that they're okay and that they can, they've proved themselves, and then they're okay to go ahead and be the training partner that their partner needs. It can be a little difficult to organize time after time to have that person in the right spot to be going first. So that's a teaching challenge for you. Change the win condition. Give correction in the same manner as if the technique were failing. So as if a technique were failing. So if the instructor is, if the training partner is winning the drill, that's something that you would correct the same way you would correct a failing technique.
We're seeing ones and twos on this one.
Yep. Yes. Again, this is assuming that winning is the important thing to the student. Yes, if you change how they win and make it quite clear, you get this right when you provide exactly the right strength to the Diestro. And if you're walking around, you're not just saying, oh, okay, this is a separate issue, but when you're walking around the classroom, if you can be reiterating the words, okay, an atahu from above with greater or equal strength pushes them off the line, so that a student can suddenly go, oh, it's failing, but I hear those words again and I now remember I'm not actually above, I'm beside. What was I talking about? In the same way, you can be walking around saying, and your training partner, making sure you're giving enough pressure for them to fold at the wrist. So you're giving the information that both of them need to hear. Okay, last one. If I'm the Diestro, I just come to a full stop and then restart the drill from the beginning.
We've seen a lot of 3s out of 4.
Yeah. If you feel that you can't call on your instructor, or this is not a bad way to handle things, it's pretty much how you handle a toddler, really. Just stop and start again. Hopefully, you should have a situation where your instructor will see what is happening and fix it. But if that's not happening, this is not a bad way. You're not getting into a war. You're just going, this is not working. You can also try talking to your training partner, and hopefully you can try putting your hand up and calling your instructor over and saying, I'm having some trouble here. There was a thought, but it's gone. Not to worry. That in fact is most what I've got here, I think. Do we have questions?
I expect that we probably do. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. I've been thinking about the way you talk about different learning styles while our crew is organizing their thoughts. And I remember when I was teaching in Tulsa 20 years ago, we had a kid who was on the spectrum, and we tried different things. And finally, what worked was to have him relax his body and tell him, I want you to be a puppet, and we're going to move your arm in the way that it needs to go. And only at that point was he able to sort of synthesize the information.
That's really interesting.
But I think you had mentioned specifically that technique when you were talking about kinetic learning.
Yes, definitely. It's moving their body with permission, absolutely. And some people just really need that. Yeah.
So Lois would like to know if you have talked about peer review when it comes to helping our teaching.
Peer review. Okay. So we need to do more of it, but we do try to do peer review of our instructors. So we actually, we have a form as well, which I can make available, which, no, it's here on the screen, where we go through and mark off, are they using our key values? Are they transparent or honest? Is there any hierarchy in the class? Is everybody got an equal right to be involved? Students are not following orders. Are they having fun? Are they enjoying being there? Are the instructors making any failure their own responsibility and not the responsibility of the students? Do we have constructive and student-centered learning? Is it collaborative and cooperative? All the students being treated inclusively? Do they all feel safe? Are we catering for a variety of learning styles? And it's so cool to watch other instructors do this. I remember watching one in particular talking and moving just so smoothly together. It's like, how do you manage to do all those words and move so fluently? It's just so impressive. I have a tendency, because I'm a very verbal learner, to sometimes, or I did in the beginning, to actually forget to display the technique. I would just talk about it and forget to display the technique. That's bad. I don't think I've done that for a long time. Okay, but we all have to, improve. We've got to start somewhere. And I did the maths, and even after, if I'd been teaching for 10 years, 1 hour a week, I'm still like a first-year high school student teacher. I'm not, even after a decade of teaching, I'm still a beginner. And I have not been teaching for a decade.
That I absolutely love about watching people learn to teach is that it constantly reminds me about all the time I made those same mistakes. Right? And I can watch what's happening, in the students now as someone makes a mistake, right? Because when I made those mistakes, in some cases, I was thinking about me and what I was doing, right, and not really paying attention to the student. And over time, as you get more experience, then you pay more attention to the student like you're supposed to. But it's that constant reminder of what you want to do.
Yes, yes. And then there's are the teachers listening to feedback and acknowledging sources? Okay. And we also have a couple of a list of specific tools actually within the class. Like, are they rotating partners? Rotating partners is really important. If you as a student are stuck with the same partner, stick your hand up and ask to rotate the class if you can. Now, when I talk about people asking for things within the class, I understand that some club cultures don't allow you to do that. So even though you should feel confident that you are not the problem and that you have the right to ask these things, whether or not you choose to exercise that right is entirely up to you. You may decide that this is the only place where you can learn and you're just going to put up with the standard or the type of learning that's really not aimed at you. Or you might decide that you want to stay there long enough so that you can change things, or you might want to go somewhere else. But definitely you should not feel that you're the problem if you're not being taught in a way that you need. Okay, are they rotating partners? Are they aware of bored or confused students? Do they respond to student requests and needs? Is their tone audible, pleasant and engaged? Are they using positive language? Are they creating a positive environment? Are they progressively introducing concept and chunking? Are they using I do, we do, you do? So I show it, we do it together. You go off and do it on your own. Are they balancing instruction on practice? Are we talking too much? Are we not talking enough? Class management. Are they on time? Are they breaking and giving their students a break? Are they staying on the topic? Is their background knowledge sufficient? And is their time shared equitably among the students? So that's, when we do a peer review, that's our checklist, and it's lined up with our pedagogy to make sure that we're covering the things that we said we want to cover. And then we can give you feedback and comments on how you're doing. So that's how our peer review system works.
That's really interesting. I kind of, it makes me wonder, like, where do I fit on that? I've never had somebody evaluate my teaching like that. I think it would be useful. We have a question about how do you suss out, how do you look for a teaching style that's right for the student? What are the clues that you look for?
Oh, okay. Usually, it's usually the student says something themselves, or they look blank. I mean, I've been in a class where something's been demonstrated visually, and then we've broken up into pairs, and I'm just standing there going, well, yeah, Picasso. And then the instructor has walked over to me and said something very visual, like a butterfly wing. So sometimes the fact that the student is standing there not doing anything is a clue that you need to try something else. And you try various different things until something clicks, because sometimes the student themselves doesn't know what they need. So, yep, sometimes they can say, like the very first class I taught, somebody said to me afterwards, I didn't understand that at all until somebody moved my blade. And I said this to Hannah, and she said, oh, that's a kinesthetic learner. And I'm like, what's a kinesthetic learner? I have no idea. So, yes, sometimes they will tell you exactly what they needed in order to learn. And sometimes you just have to try and try and try again until you hit on something that works. But certainly, if you've tried something a couple of times and they're still not getting it, it's very instinctive to say the same thing again, and it's just not logical. If they're not getting it, repeating it is not likely to help. Try it in come in at a different angle. And that's kind of when it helps to have those categories from Gardner's intelligence theory, because it gives you, okay, something to run through in your head. All right, well, I've done it visually and I've done it in words. Maybe I need to move their blade. Maybe I need to draw them a picture. Yeah? So that can be helpful. I have got a link in there to some stuff on Gardner's intelligence theory. I'm not in any way pushing the stuff that's being sold on their website, but it does have some good checklists that you can, with concrete examples that you could go through. So that's in there as well. Yep. The BSIS peer review criteria sheet we can give you a link to as well. So if anybody wants to just peer review themselves, that can help with your 3 things I did well, 3 things I I didn't. Things I need to work on. Yeah.
So let's talk about maybe a different challenge. So what if a student has, for example, like social anxiety? So maybe they don't want to rotate, right? Or maybe they find that piece of it a little overwhelming. Do you permit that kind of thing in the class? Or maybe they prefer to work with a single person to see if they can develop something just to where they want it?
Well, our key values are to respect our students and enjoyment. We want them to have a good time. So we do try to gently get people out of their shell, because it does help to try techniques against various different people. But yes, you'll have a couple come, and one of the couple is particularly shy and only wants to do a technique with somebody else. I find it's best to start with letting that happen. As they get to know the school and become more comfortable and get to actually know people, then I'll start to rotate them through. But quite often in the early classes, we will let them stick with the people they're comfortable with. Because we really want everybody that comes in to have a good experience and want to come back. Because Destreza is awesome and everybody should learn it.
I'm with you. So I think some of the other speakers from BSIS, is that how you say it? Or BSIS?
Yes, so BSIS, I think, yeah.
Yeah. They've probably mentioned how large the school is, but it escapes me at the moment. Pre-pandemic, about how many members did you have?
We had, I think, 50, but we're very relaxed on when people come. So 15 people turning up on a particular night is pretty standard. Last night last Wednesday we had quite low numbers. The week before we had 25 people in. So it's never predictable, which is quite challenging in some ways. You really, sometimes a class just doesn't exist, and sometimes the class is twice as big as you expected it to be. People turn up who haven't been for 8 months, and you're folding them into a class with people who've been there every week for the last 5 weeks. It's a teaching challenge.
So you guys in Australia are able to physically meet?
Yes, we are currently in our state, and we are currently allowed to do that, and we are allowed to do full combat. Once we come off the floor, we need to socially distance, but we are allowed to do proper Destreza. We did look at coming back at the stage when we were allowed to only do drills and no approaching within the 1.5 meters, and we decided that was just not fun.
So we have a couple of cheeky questions from some of your members of the chat. Okay, so the first cheeky question is, what is your strategy for teaching acometimiento?
Okay. I haven't actually taught this as a class or as a specific technique. So I would have done, my first strategy would be to talk to Sean and Lois more about it, because I know they have taught more about it. My one thing of pride is actually teaching Sean to pronounce accompany, because it's quite a long word. So I broke it up. I said, well, look, you can say pediatric gastroenterologist. So there's actually no problem with saying the word. Let's break it up into something such as, okay, imagine a bowl of mince on a table. You're about to have a committee meeting, and you pick out one mint. This is a committee mint. And then we just have to change a couple of vowels, and you can say the word. So have I sufficiently distracted from the fact that I haven't answered the question by giving an amusing anecdote?
I think this is a lovely object lesson, though. I would describe this as learning styles and chunking.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
That's wonderful. Okay, I feel like that was a good answer to that. Let's do a peer review of Pacheco.
Oh, okay. Does he have integrity? Is he transparent and honest? I don't want to answer these questions. Would somebody else like to? Is he humble?
He is definitely not.
Does he treat people with respect? Well, I suppose it depends who he's teaching. I think that if I were doing a peer review of Pacheco, I would have some areas that he could work on. And no doubt I would be able to tell him that his actual technical ability is magnificent and his theoretical background is very good, and perhaps he could work a little on humility and humility and acknowledging sources, perhaps. I don't know.
Oh, they are, the chat is crowing for blood, and I'm like, yeah, you can't ask for blood. She's modeling, right? That's the whole point. She's showing you how to do this in a nice way. Oh, Tim says Pacheco too is exceptionally humble. I think probably everyone Pacheco would tell you that he was the most humble of all of them.
Yes, actually, yes. I'm probably directing that more at Pacheco than I should have than at Carranza.
Yeah. Lois says only I could be as humble as I am.
We had another question. I think this was meant for you. In the notes, why are there so many pages on the generals?
Oh, well, it's actually a very good example in teaching people in the way they want to learn, is that I found that everybody wanted to explain generals differently. And when I'd say, okay, so do you want it like this? And one person would say, I want that one. And another person would say, I want that one. And it's like, okay, you can have them all. For those who haven't looked, there's pictures, there's generals as a table, there's generals at the moment of the finishing the spiral, there's generals as a physical description the whole way through, there's tables sorting them in different orders. It's like, well, it clicks with different people in different ways. So they've got them all.
Perfect.
Yes. And I just also like to say that there's a bit of collaboration in those images that they originally did not have as much expression, and people said to me, why do they all just look blank? Why are they not smiling? So the smiles and the frowns are the responsibility of feedback.
Oh, nice. We have a question. What would you recommend that people do during the quarantine to work on their teaching?
Oh, to work on their teaching. Well, there's a couple of videos you could read. Kaya Sadowski's book, I thoroughly recommend that. You could watch Keith Farrell's video. What else could you do? Read through the other things that I've given you. I'm not sure what else we could do. It's hard without a student in front of you to bounce off and find out what you're doing right and wrong.
It can be difficult, but it's worth practicing your speaking style, giving feedback to yourself doing things. Right? Yes. Just like you might practice something like in the shower or while driving or somewhere where you're private, like you can actually practice your speech thought patterns.
Yes, yes. And pay attention to whether you're using positive language and to what kind of tone that you're using. I know when I first started practicing this, I was like, why is my tone so hectoring? And then I realized I was replying to some of those poor or not BSIS style suggestions on the internet, and that was the image I had in the front of my mind. I thought, well, that's not the people I'm talking to. So I had to remind myself that I'm talking to a bunch of people who are keen and interested to learn. And hopefully that has come across in my tone today. So yeah, working on tone is really important.
That's one of the things I try to keep in mind at the point where somebody walks in the door to a school. That's a very unusual sort of person to come out and do something where they know they're putting their trust in you. They're ready to accept that they want to learn a skill and everything that goes along with that. I feel that that's an incredibly brave sort of thing to do.
Yes.
So I try to treat that with a lot of respect.
Yeah. And they don't know what learning environment they're walking into. They don't know what kind of work we'll be asking them to put in, or whether they will feel comfortable. So it's good to allow them to get to know you and be comfortable.
That's a really good point. So maybe you can delve into that a little bit. When that student first walks in the door, or what are your strategies, welcoming strategies? How do you bring them in, explain them what's going on?
We try to have a desk manned for the first 15 minutes before the lesson starts and a bit after. So there's somebody at the desk, and we're all usually quite excited to have a new person. So there's a bit of a chat. We'll introduce them to the person that's rostered on for the beginner course that night. Usually that will start after footwork. So when footwork starts, if it's something they can do, we'll tell them that they're welcome to join in, and usually an instructor will keep a very close eye on them to interpret what's being said and go and say, okay, yeah, now you need to move your foot here, and make sure that they're not being overwhelmed, and maybe reduce what they're being asked to do. We certainly had beginners in on Wednesday that did the footwork and were quite comfortable with it by the time that they finished. And then they go on to the beginner course, where we basically find out whether they're safe with a sword in their hand, and teach them enough so that we can drop them into any novice lessons so they get an ataho, and try and make it friendly and welcoming, and let them know who's there. We tell them about our happiness officer if they have any issues. Yeah, and I find they tend to be quite welcomed. We all really keen to see the new kid, and all of our instructors are quite keen to pass on. It's like, Destreza, we love it. You'll love it too. So we do gravitate towards the new ones and have a chat to them while they're waiting.
It's really lovely. So I have another question. So sometimes, I think through the course of this lecture, you've talked about valuing the individual quite a bit. What do you do when somebody comes into the class that is toxic or dangerous? How do you handle that? So like for example, head of the Chicago Swordplay Guild, Greg Miley, had somebody come into the class who was dangerous. So he worked with that person individually and ended up getting a broken neck. So
sorry.
It's all right.
That was on silent.
So sometimes someone's going to come into the school that is dangerous or behaves in a toxic way. Do you have a strategy in place? How do you deal with that?
I think it would depend on what that danger is coming from. If we've got a student who's dangerous because they're simply doing things that are beyond their abilities, then we would work on moving them back to a level where they can be safe. So that might mean pulling them out of class for a bit to assist them with those movement skills. If somebody is refusing to calibrate blows or something like that, our priority is the safety of the school and the safety of the other students. So if they can't be made safe, then they can't be there. It's not an issue we've come across at this point in time. So, yeah, we haven't had to deal with that. But yes, it would certainly be something that would be discussed at an instructor meeting. It's not something that one instructor would just have the ability to say, you are not safe, you are not welcome. but you'd pull them out of class if you felt the class could not be safe, and then it would go to an instructor meeting and we would discuss how on earth we were going to deal with that one. But we do not ever want to put our students in danger.
Yeah.
Does that answer your
question? It does. It's a tough call. Oh, so that was kind of a downer of a question. Let's see if there are other questions from the chat. Maybe something a little more positive. Eric, I've been thinking out loud and asking some questions. Did you have anything that you wanted to ask?
Well, I was just thinking about something. I recall Sean saying that you guys do like demos and presentations in other places. Do I remember that correctly?
We have had, we don't do them as a school. Our instructors have done presentations. Yes, Lois in particular has done quite a few, and Sean as well, interstate presentations, both of them. Ryan is very experienced. I don't know if he's done a presentation as such.
So Lois is just saying that as a school you do Lanham Park.
We do what, sorry?
Lanham Park.
Those things.
Oh, feats in public displays. Sorry, I had the wrong terminology.
I'm with you. I got you now. Yes, we do. We'd like to get ourselves out there in the community, to be part of the community, and also because hopefully locals will see us and come to us. But so Lanham Park is a council fete that's once a year. We're missing all of these. I have an app that I use specifically for all of our displays and HEMA events and tournaments, and this last year it's been popping up going, this is next week, and I'm like, oh no, it's not. No, which is a bit sad. So we didn't do quite a lot of them this year, and we usually go along, we show, we talk a bit about what Destreza is. We have somebody on the mic, usually that's Lois, and we bring as many people as we can, even the less experienced students, so that we can show the progression. So we talk about what you might encounter in each grade, and we talk about the kind of weapons that we might use. And that's
actually what I was going to get to, is like, how do you bring your students into that? How do you like bring the whole school together as a community to do these things? How do you involve people?
We harass them. We tell them again and again, this is coming up.
That's a 5.
Yeah. Come, help us. The more the merrier. It's good fun. You'll love it. People applaud. You get to show off what you can do. Come along and be a part of it, and people roll up. That's enough. We also try to build the community, and like, again, we're not doing this at the moment, but we have parties twice a year, plus a Christmas party at Ron's place. He has a flying fox. I mean, what more can you ask for? An archery range. So yeah, we try to get everybody together, and in a social sense, after training, we'll go out for ice cream, because it's Brisbane and it's hot. And so we try very much to build the social side of things. COVID is making that really difficult, and it's really tough on us as a school, because we are not a get in, train, get out kind of school. We're a get in, train, break for water, everybody stand around the water cooler and chat, train some more, go out for ice cream. That's our ethos, and it's tough to have to let some of that go for the time being.
But you have that inculcated as a cultural thing. Yeah.
So culturally, we have a quite tight-knit group, so it does become a bit easier to say, hey folks, come along, we're doing a thing. Okay, so cool. Lanham Park Fair, Multicultural Festival, school fates, not so great, because usually the kids are too young to be learning Destreza, so we don't get a lot of students out of that, but we do get community goodwill.
We have been, as of tomorrow, or I think tonight, we've been 24 weeks without class.
Oof.
Yep.
Oof. That
Okay,
is
so yeah, it's a long time. We have another question from the chat. Do you give homework?
No, explicitly no. We don't give homework. We believe that our students should learn everything that they need to learn in class. And when we hand over the class notes, we say, you do not ever have to read these unless you want to. You'll get students who will practice at home because they want to, and that's great. And certainly I say to them, if you want to progress faster, then practicing at home is the way to do it. 5 minutes a day even can make a huge difference to how fast your body learns these things. But certainly these people, our students, they have jobs, they have studies. We want this to be a fun thing for them to do, an enjoyable exercise. If they want to spend their evenings reading everything there is on Destreza, then I applaud that, and I'll have fun talking with them about it. And if they want to go home and practice a thrust against a doorpost over and over again, that's really going to help them. But they're in charge of how fast they want to learn. So not homework. If they ask me for what they can work on, absolutely. But things that they have to work on, no. That's very much against the way we approach things.
Just a related question. What sort of things would you recommend somebody practice at home?
Depends what stage they're at. I do find it very frustrating with Destreza. It's like so much better with a training partner. But certainly targeting can be very useful. Targeting, if you can find a pole at home that you can practice against, definitely that. Footwork. We do teach some footwork that we do with music. So, and I do say afterwards, when the music's on at home, do you Destreza footwork while it's, while you're dancing around the kitchen? You can dance Destreza. But footwork is definitely one you can practice at home and you just can't get enough of.
Yeah, and if you don't dance in your kitchen, I'm not sure I even want to know you.
That's right. It's like, that's what kitchens are for, right?
Right. Okay, we have another good question here. I'd like to hear a teaching success story. So not any names, but like an example of something where this went really well.
Okay. Oh, I'm so proud of them all. And they own their own successes. It's not me. It's they've done the work. I may have helped them and shown them the way, but they've done the work. And I particularly identify with the ones that come in and they don't know their left foot from their right foot, because that was me. That was definitely me. So I get particular pleasure out of a student who can finally understand how to put an tahoe on in a way that's effective. Just that alone is very exciting for me. And getting the shy ones out of their shell, the ones that sit, and we have combat time an hour at the end. And if it's a very, very scary thing to approach somebody and ask them to fight when you've never done that kind of thing before. So I do try and go up to them and ask them to fight, and our instructors do that as well. But to see somebody who is very shy, wants desperately to be out there doing Destreza, but doesn't think anybody wants to do it with them. The first time you see them walk over and ask somebody to fence, that's very cool.
We have somebody who came up with the phrase discometimiento.
What?
I think that describes that nervousness about asking somebody to fight.
Oh, all right.
All right. Well, it is 10 minutes after the hour, so we've actually run over time. He's talking about dancing in his kitchen, so it's not discometimiento, it's disco metimiento. Yeah.
Oh, and I do it so badly, but never mind.
Yeah.
I model failure for my students. It's important to model failure because failure is an essential part of learning. So when I take them through the musical footwork, I do it really badly, and that gives them hope.
We try to be good at laughing at ourselves in class.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, because setting yourself up to be a god of fencing is really hard to maintain. It's just not worth the effort.
Exactly.
Sorry, Puck, you were.
No, I'm just like,
wrapping
yeah,
things up.
I totally identify with that. All right, so that is our time. I just want to take a moment to mention next week's speaker is going to be Jose Javier Salazar Medina, and he is one of the instructors from AIA in Spain. He'll be speaking to us next week. Really, and he's been really active on the Destreza and the SCA Facebook group, answering questions and just being really pretty nice to everybody. But as to you, Kate, thank you so much for talking to us today. I felt like I got a lot out of it. I just really love the positive vibe that I get from BSIS and from everybody who does all this really great work. I love to see how you guys have taken things and really run with it. I think you are like 2 to 5 times larger than our school at any given moment. And I think that just says something about how well you guys are organized and what you do with it.
We do somewhat consider ourselves an offshoot of your school. So.
That's very sweet of you. And we are so glad to have that relationship with you guys. I feel like we get a lot out of it. So thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. And thank you to all of the people in the audience tonight. Everybody, please stay safe, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Kate. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.